So, after a pretty rocky first season, at least in regards to fan reception, The Acolyte has now been officially confirmed to not be returning for a second season. Disney has cancelled the show on Disney+, no more Acolyte, and when this news came across my timeline yesterday, I thought to myself, I've not actually spoken about The Acolyte on this channel yet, despite the fact I've been doing these new videos, while The Acolyte's been on. I haven't actually spoken about it yet. So, with the cancellation of Season 2, now with, on our timelines and just knowing that we're not going to be getting that second season, I thought now is a good enough time as any to take a look back at the first season of The Acolyte and talk about what I liked about the show, because The Acolyte has been getting so much controversy, so much negativity thrown its way, and don't get me wrong, the show is not perfect. It has a lot of flaws, but I think a bit of positivity is needed in regard to The Acolyte, and I wanted to bring that positivity on my channel. So in this video, this is my defense video of The Acolyte. So if you're coming to this video looking for angry clickbait and all that, you're in the completely wrong place. Turn off the video now. This is going to be a video where I'm going to be talking mostly purely positively about The Acolyte. Also, by the time you see this video, it is going to be like a good few days out of date. It's because I'm actually pre-recording this one ahead of time because I'm going to be away over the next few days, so I'm not going to have a chance to make a video for like next week. So I'm doing it ahead of time, so you're still getting a video. So there you go. So yeah, The Acolyte did finish its first season a few weeks back, and I was watching the show week to week as it was coming out, and I was also looking at obviously all the reviews and everything that was coming out about the show week to week, and it just was really frustrating because Star Wars is in a really tricky place right now. I think Disney, the way they've handled Star Wars since purchasing it from Lucasfilm, it's certainly not been a smooth ride. And I think one of those big problems that Disney has had is how to deliver Star Wars content to us. They've really used Disney Plus as a vehicle for Star Wars, and I think we can all agree that that hasn't been working. I think, especially with The Acolyte being one of the prime examples of that, the 8-episode seasons where we're getting like 30-minute episodes, it's just not enough to fully flesh out these stories. And I think The Acolyte, which had such a new and fresh and interesting story that we'd never seen before within the Star Wars series, for them to kind of just barrel through it in 8 episodes, which was basically, 8 half-an-hour episodes, that was just not enough time to really let it cook. I think Star Wars recently on Disney Plus has been the same in pretty much all of its shows. I think when you look at Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ahsoka, even like Mandalorian Season 3, all of those shows have suffered from the same pacing problems where at some times the show feels really slow and feels like it's sluggishly pulling itself along, but then at other times it just barrels through a storyline. And I feel like this inconsistent pacing is the biggest problem that Disney is facing right now when it comes to Star Wars, and it's because they're not focusing on making Star Wars a theatrical event like they used to. They're using it just as a content wheel to start just piling stuff onto Disney Plus, and it's made Star Wars feel less like an event and special and more like a chore. However, going back to The Acolyte, was I excited about this show? Yeah, I actually was. Out of all of the current Star Wars projects we have going on right now, and ones that were coming out and ones that have yet to come out, The Acolyte was one that always stood above the rest for me personally, because back when that was announced in 2020, I was really excited for it because the idea was awesome. A High Republic era show about the rise of the Sith for the first time in years. That was really interesting, especially because when they pitched it back in the day, it sounded like it was going to be a show that was done from the perspective of the Sith. And that was interesting because that's something we've never seen before. Not in this degree. And I was really looking forward to seeing how Disney were going to handle that, because this was typically the sort of show I didn't think they would make. There was other shows they were announcing at the time, like Rangers of the New Republic and an Ahsoka series, Obi-Wan series. All of those were like, yeah, that makes sense. But The Acolyte sounded really unique. So personally, I was looking forward to that. But like I say, now the entire season's over, I want to talk about the show in retrospect and talk about what I personally thought the show did well and what I liked about it, because overall I did enjoy this show and I would have liked to have seen more. Firstly, this show was set in the High Republic era. That was awesome because we haven't seen the High Republic era in live action ever. It's a pretty new-ish thing that's been introduced into Star Wars lore, the High Republic, and the fact that the show just kind of took it on its shoulders to be like, right, let's do the High Republic, that was awesome because, a constant criticism Star Wars gets is it's staying in the same time period. We're always focusing around the time of the original trilogy and the Skywalker saga. We need to branch out from that. And that's what The Acolyte did. It said, okay, we're going to move far, far away from that. This show took place around 100 years before The Phantom Menace, so this was a huge time gap in between those two projects, and taking us to the High Republic era allowed us to see the world in a slightly different way. We got to see the Jedi in their prime. You know, a lot of people talk about how in the prequels we got to see the Jedi in their prime, and we certainly did, but obviously that was the Jedi starting to, you know, fall apart, basically. This is the Jedi when they were in complete control, pretty much. And that was interesting because you kind of have the Jedi in this position of insane hubris where they are the rule makers. They are in charge of everything. They are the ones who are commanding everything. And you've got certain subsets of the government who are not actually trusting the Jedi. They don't like the way they do things. They don't like how they operate. And that created like this interesting tension that I wish they could have delved into that more, because it wasn't really until the last couple of episodes when they introduced like David Harewood's character, who was really questioning the Jedi and their motives, that was a really interesting plot point to bring into. But as I mentioned before, the show just doesn't have enough time to flesh these things out. And I feel like that could have been just an extra little cherry on top for this show had they had the time. And just as a small little nitpick as well for the High Republic era, I do wish we would have seen a little bit more about how this era was different, because unfortunately the show again doesn't really have enough time to go into, you know, why this era is so different from what we were in before. It kind of feels like the prequels in a sense, but they have the Jedi in a slightly different position. So like I say, I loved seeing the High Republic era. I thought it was fantastic. I really enjoyed the costume design. I really enjoyed, you know, all the different Jedi and how they all have the different lightsabers and stuff like that, because we haven't really seen yellow lightsabers in live action, not properly anyway. So that was really, really cool. It also just could have done with a little bit more refinement. Speaking of lightsabers, lightsaber choreography is the best it has been since the prequel trilogy in The Acolyte. We got some incredible fight scenes in this show. When you look even in the first episode, the fight between Master Indara and May, that was an awesome fight that set a precedent for this show. And when you look at all the other fights throughout, of course, in episodes like Day and Night, they were both incredible. Especially Night was just a phenomenal, like that might have been the best episode of the entire season. It was really strong. I also really enjoyed the fights in the finale between Master Soul and Kamir. I thought there was a really cool fight. And also when Osha finally turned to the dark side at the end of the season, that was also a really cool way that they kind of used the lightsaber to show that. We actually saw a character bleed a lightsaber for the first time in live action. That was awesome. Like, there's all these elements to do with, you know, certain elements of Star Wars lore that we've never seen in live action, but The Acolyte brought it to the screen, and that's why I really enjoyed it, because it just showed us these things that I've always wanted to see, that I've seen in comics and books before, but never seen in live action, and we finally got to see that here. But yeah, the lightsaber choreography was absolutely on point. Like, a lot of people talk about how amazing the prequels were with their lightsaber choreography, how well it was planned out, and how it was almost like a dance. The Acolyte is certainly closest to that than we've ever had from anything else. It's just really great, and I think the actors really threw themselves into it, particularly the actress who played Jackie, Daphne Keane, who of course is X-23. She did a phenomenal job with her lightsaber work, and I think everyone did as well. I think all the actors here did a really good job, and they committed to learning how to truly be a lightsaber master, and I think it really pays off on screen. And characters, I think that The Acolyte had a really strong cast of characters. I know a lot of people were saying that, particularly by the end of the season, some of these characters kind of got assassinated, which is kind of true for a couple of them, but overall, I enjoyed the characters we got in this show. Specifically, I think the strongest character in the entire series was the Stranger, aka Kamir. I just thought he was fantastic. A really good villain. I kind of wish, you know, as I mentioned before, this show was initially kind of pitched as being a show told from the perspective of the Sith. I kind of wish, in a way, he was the protagonist, because he was a really interesting Sith character, one who was badass, capable, and also not really under the guise of anyone else. I mean, of course, there was the tease at the end of Darth Plagueis, but we don't really know what the dynamic was between Plagueis and Kamir. We don't really know what was going on there exactly. It seemed like Kamir was almost like a bit of a lone wolf, and I really enjoyed that. And his lightsaber combat reflected that as well. He had a dual-bladed lightsaber which he could connect into one. It was just really exciting. His helmet, which blocked out force communication, he could also break lightsabers with it. He was just a great character. Really enjoyed him. And the twist as well. I personally didn't see the twist coming. And so when it was revealed that Kamir was the Stranger, that to me was a really cool reveal. And the way that his relationship then changed with May, and also with Osha over time, that was a really cool little story. Master Soul was also another fan favorite character for me personally. I loved Lee Jung-jae in this show. The fact that he learned English just to portray this character is just admirable. And not only that, he gives us a fantastic performance. I think he's really, really great here. Of course, I mean, a lot of people have seen him from Squid Game on Netflix. I've personally not seen Squid Game, but I've heard obviously it's really good, and he's great in it. But here in The Acolyte as Master Soul, perfect casting, great character, really wise, but also a Jedi who you can see has a lot of flaws to him. You can see that he has a lot going on beneath the surface from something that's haunting him in his past. And I think that Lee Jung-jae delivers that really well. I also think that Master Soul has some fun lightsaber combat as well, especially in the finale. He did some really cool stuff there. I really enjoyed what he brought to the show and what he brought to the screen. And I was really sad that he died at the end, because if we did get a Season 2, having a Season 2 without Master Soul, that would have been quite sad, in my opinion. And I also have to give special shout out to Amanda Stenberg, who of course played Osha and May. I think she did a wonderful job. She's been getting a lot of criticism from, not real Star Wars fans online, similar to Moses Ingram from Obi-Wan Kenobi, saying that she was awful. She was not. Amanda Stenberg honestly does incredible work here. The fact that she plays two versions of what is essentially the same character, but plays them very, very differently as twins, I thought was really well handled. She does it great. She does enough to differentiate between the two, so you know which character is which on screen, outside of obviously just costume change and stuff like that. But she was really great. And I really loved as well, particularly Osha and May as characters, because they start off on two opposite ends of the spectrum, and then by the end of the show, they kind of have crossed paths. They meet in the middle, but then they kind of go past, and they end up on the other side that they started on. And that was a really interesting dynamic to see play out, and would have been even more interesting had we have gotten a Season 2, especially with it ending with Kamir taking on Osha as his new Sith apprentice, and further implementing the rule of two. That would have been a really interesting storyline for Season 2, and I think it would have been so great to see Amanda Stenberg further flex her acting muscles with that. And I also just think the central conflict of this show being a murder mystery set within the Star Wars universe, within the Jedi Council, again, that's just cool. That's interesting. We've not seen that before. Star Wars, at least in the movies and in the TV shows, have never quite done a murder mystery. And this was a really interesting way to go about it. And again, putting that in the High Republic era as well, when the Jedi is at their high point of hubris, that could have been better played. Now, as mentioned, this show wasn't perfect. I'm not going to sit here and say that it was perfect. It's the best thing ever, and this is the best thing that Star Wars has ever produced, because it's not. But while it does have its flaws, like poor writing, the poor pacing, which I mentioned before, and also that the show doesn't have enough time to breathe, it's still something different. I thought this was something new for Star Wars. It's something fresh. And for me personally, I would much prefer a company and a TV show to try something new and fail, rather than do the same old thing and make it boring. Because that's how I feel like Star Wars has been recently. They've just been doing the same old stuff, and it's not been very interesting. It's been a little bit boring from time to time. At least here with The Acolyte, even if it wasn't the best and you didn't love it, at least they tried something new. And that, to me, I think is a lot more admirable than just spinning their wheels. In regards to the cancellation, I was really sad about it. I was disappointed that we're not going to be getting a Season 2, because I personally would rather have a Season 2 of The Acolyte than a Season 2 of a lot of the other shows. I'd honestly rather have a Season 2 of The Acolyte more than a Season 2 of Andor, a Season 2 of Obi-Wan. I'd rather have this more than a Season 2 of Ahsoka, which I think we are getting a second season of Ahsoka. I'd rather have Season 2 of The Acolyte more than any of those, because, again, this to me is just more interesting. It's more different. It's more unique. I feel like I've not seen this before. Whereas all these other shows that I've just mentioned, we've seen all that stuff. I mean, I know at least with Andor, that was kind of pitched as a 2-season show, and we know how that story is eventually going to wrap up. But in the case of Ahsoka, I mean, I liked Ahsoka. I thought the first season was good, but I don't know if I'm necessarily, chomping at the bit for a Season 2. Obi-Wan was a limited series, so we're probably not going to get a second season of that, and also, what more would you really do with Obi-Wan at this point? But I think at least with The Acolyte, this is a whole new realm of Star Wars that we've not explored before, with whole new characters that aren't going to link into anything. I mean, yes, we've got Plagueis and Yoda at the end, but whatever. At least at the end, primarily, this is going to be focused on, the rise of the Sith, leading up, into the 100 years leading into the prequels. That is an interesting story. That's new. That's fresh. That would be a much better alternative, in my opinion, than all these other projects that we've had and that we're going to be getting over the next 5 years. But overall, like I say, I did enjoy The Acolyte. I thought it was a good show. It's not perfect. I'd probably give it a 7 or an 8 out of 10 overall. But for me, I enjoyed it, and it's really frustrating to see all these fans online who are just haven't even watched the show in most cases and are just bashing it. I even know people in real life who have been doing it, and it's just, and I know for a fact that they haven't watched it. I know them personally. I was like, you have not watched this show. And it's frustrating because, you know, if you've watched the show and you genuinely didn't like it, that's fair enough, of course. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. But this is unfortunately another victim in the kind of Disney, Star Wars, Lucasfilm purge that's going on over the past few years, where if the show features too many female characters or too many people of color or too many members of the LGBT community on screen, it just gets so much backlash. And it's frustrating because, you know, those elements are so important in a show like this, in a brand so popular and diverse as Star Wars. It's so important to have those elements in there. And seeing that the show, as you know, for something that is as good as The Acolyte, is being just shoved aside for those reasons, it's annoying. And that's why I wanted to come on camera, and even though this video was kind of rough around the edges, it wasn't really scripted particularly well, I just wanted to come on and talk about what I liked about The Acolyte, talk about the positives of the show, and not necessarily talk about its flaws. Not ignore its flaws, but more so focus on the positives and why I thought the show was a interesting piece of Star Wars lore that has now been added to the canon. But what did you guys think about Star Wars The Acolyte? Make sure to let me know your thoughts on the show in the comment section down below. Let's please keep it respectful in the comment section. I don't want to see any, you know, abuse going on down there. Just some nice positive rambling in the comment section down below. Tell me what you think about The Acolyte. And if you want to see more content like this, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any uploads from me. And I hope to see you guys again next time.